Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you so much for joining us as we bring to you yet another Last Word on Spurs. This one probably a little bit unexpected. Maybe you'd argue it wasn't pre-planned, but due to the nature of our football club, that cannot in any way be normal. We are back again. Just crazy. We thought we would do this show so this doesn't interrupt or destable the game against Fulham, which quite frankly, I mean, look, 24 hours on with Tottenham, I can't promise or give you any kind of hope or optimism what can be stable or destable with our football club right now. But joining me on this show tonight, I'm joined by Barnaby, Adam and Jason on this Last Word on Spurs. If you're listening to us for the first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We're on Facebook and Instagram too. And just to give you an idea of what is coming your way tonight, it just feels like a running soap drama of Tottenham Hotspur. We'll be discussing Antonio Conte's future, Fabio Paratici being banned, subject to an appeal, I must add in there, where we are quite right now on ENIC, in, out, the movement, you'd argue, the January transfer window, and we have actually got a game as well against Fulham tomorrow, which I know at the moment seems to pan into real insignificance given the basket case of our football club. So apart from that, expect a fairly quiet show. So let's go round and go through the panel tonight. Barnaby, lovely to have you back on Last Word on Spurs. Been a long time since we've seen your face back on a YouTube screen. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, very well, Ricky. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, no problem at all. Now, I must say, Barnaby, you're working on a new project, which we do want to give a bit of a mention to. Do you want to give an idea now? Just so we don't bring the mood down completely and we'll then give it a mention at the end?
Yes, I've started a new page on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube called Football Penalty Gamble. I used to be a goalkeeper back in my day and I've taken it back up and I'm offering people money to score 5 penalties against me. So you can win up to 100 quid, score 5 penalties against me. Go on at Football Penalty Gamble. You can watch how people are doing, whether they're winning the money or not. And drop me a DM if you find me on one of those platforms and take on the challenge.
Sure. At the moment, we all need some kind of breakaway from Tottenham, so why not? Let's go and take some penalties. Let's most certainly do that. Joining Barnaby tonight, I'd like to have him back on the show. He's here talking finances, but tonight he's talking more than just finances with our football club. We've got the wonderful Ad Osper from Sports Finance. Ads, quite want to come back to.
Yeah, I'm going to take the leash off tonight and rant. Normally, I'm trying to be sensible, and you call me the
level headed one normally. You're normally quite calm. If you're losing it, we've got problems. If you're losing it, we have got issues.
I got things to say, things to get off my chest.
Oh, well, I think it is going to be one of those shows. No, mate, always a pleasure, always a pleasure. And delighted to have him back alongside me. Look, one of the regulars here in Last Word on Spurs. Always seems to tell it as it is. I don't think even he could predict what we're going through right now. Jace, has this been... Jace, you've been doing Last Word on Spurs since the last 5-6 years. Have you ever quite known of a period or shows like we are having to produce at the moment? Honestly.
Well, I think we've just said off air, haven't we, that we're in a situation where our captain we want out of the club, or most people want out of the club. Our star player wants out of the club. Our manager looks like it's one day he does and one day he doesn't. Our director of football looks like he might be leaving in handcuffs, and our chairman looks like, people want him out. So apart from the key 5 layers of the football club failing, then I must admit this is a new one on me.
Yeah, I like to say every single day this football club does not fail to surprise you. And I kind of referenced this point. I actually don't think I said it off air, but normally going to bed and then waking up after a defeat, you have that horrendous feeling thinking, oh, we lost that game last night. That's now being replaced by, quite frankly, a feeling of, oh, Tottenham Hotspur, what are you doing to us? Like, what are you doing to us? And it's continuous. I mean, I can't believe what is happening day by day. I know it sounds mad. I know you should never be surprised being a Spurs fan, but even this, my God, is just on another level. So we're going to rewind. For those, I know a lot of you listen to this on your morning Monday commute, but we're recording here late on a Sunday evening. So on Sunday morning here, for those in the UK, we woke up to news from Damasio, who is a real credible Italian journalist who is really, really close to Antonio Conte. He actually visited the training ground not soon after Conte was appointed by the football club. And Damasio's words were this morning, the news I can tell you with certainty is that Antonio Conte will leave Tottenham at the end of the season. The spark did not go off. The contract is expiring and the club did not ask him for a renewal. He furthered that up and said the club did not like the frequent jibes. Conte wants players to win, while the club prefers players to trade. The feeling with the club has not clicked. His family, among other things, has remained in Italy. Now, after that, 4, 5, 6 hours after that, we got an amendment to that story from Damasio himself. 4 or 5 hours after. I'm not sure what happened in those 4 or 5 hours. I'll leave the viewers here to speculate what happened. And then the adjusted version of that was that Antonio Conte and Tottenham's board enjoy a good relationship. The Spurs manager's contract would expire next June the 30th, and the club has already offered the possibility to stay with a new deal. However, Conte is now focused on the present. He does not want to think about the future, so he has asked the club to put the situation on standby. And there are a little bit more facets to that story, which you can go and check out on Damasio's own Twitter. But quite frankly, that sent ructions across Spurs social media this morning. And then in addition to that, we've had some counteracting stories by some of the British press, where we've had one from Matt Law from The Telegraph, who says Conte has not made a decision on his future. Still an awful lot more time to play in the season, and nothing will be decided until much closer in the season. And then we've had that followed up by a couple of reports saying the club aren't happy with the way Conte has been in his press conferences. So at the moment, I think it's fair to say just an absolute mess with regards to a manager when Spurs are still, as they stand, capable. You're going to laugh as I say this. I can hear the laughter track in the background. Capable of still maybe pushing on to the top 4 if they do their January business correctly and not leave it to the end of the month. They are still in the FA Cup and they have still got a Champions League double-header to come. So, Barnaby, let's start with you to try and unpack what is yet another soap drama or an episode in Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Barnaby, what's happening? What is happening to our club?
Well, that's a good question. I'm kind of surprised that anybody was surprised about all this, to be honest. It's very similar to me as to all the reports that were coming out of Conte's camp a year ago. And he likes to keep the board on their toes, to keep Levy on their toes, and keep the players on their toes. And it seems to me, if indeed, as we're told, this journalist is one of Conte's kind of go-to guys. It seems to me that it's probably been released now because, there's 8, 9, 10 days left of the window. How much money are you going to spend? What are you going to give me? Because we need some, because we're behind, can't even think about Arsenal, but we're behind Newcastle and Manchester United, and we're going to be fighting with Chelsea and Liverpool behind us for the top 4. And unless we get 2 signings of the quality that we stumbled upon in Decky Kulusevski and Rodrigo Bentancur, then we're going to be languishing. So it strikes me, like I said, like I started, I'm surprised if anyone's surprised. The thing that I would say is he's only got 6 months left on his deal. So we're talking about a chairman who has sacked somebody in the week of a cup final before. So if Conte really didn't want him, I don't think the 6 months of pay for Conte to be paid off is that much. And if he really wanted Pochettino back, then I think it would happen tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? But I think Levy believes in Conte, and I think Conte is saying to Levy, what are you going to give me to make me stay, just like he did a year ago? So I'm not massively surprised myself, so I didn't kind of react in the big way that a lot of Spurs social media did. But the one thing I'd say that I'm starting to feel that is turning the dial a little bit for me is the reality of when I look at how Brighton are playing and how Fulham are playing, Conte does get us, playing on the ground more than, good football more than Mourinho does. But the defensive style of it is not as enjoyable to watch as watching Brighton or Fulham. And if we're not winning at the same time, then I am now far less kind of bothered about Conte staying than I was at the back end of last season when we were playing some good stuff, albeit still on the counter-attacking side.
Barnaby, there's a lot of love for you. You'll probably see this in the comments right now. Lots of love for you pouring in. Lovely to hear your dulcet tones back on a podcast. Ads, let's come round to you. I must add as well that in relation to Damasio's story, he did actually add on to say that Conte's not living in an easy moment, speaking about his private life in the last few months. He has lost 3 good friends, Jean-Pierre Ventrone, Gianluca Vialli, Sinisa Maholovic. I hope I pronounced that right. And obviously some days ago, he did emphasise the point that sometimes we place so much importance on work and put aside our families that need to be with them. Then things like this happen, they make you think. So the feeling from Damasio is that at the end of the current season, there will be almost like a mutual parting where Conte will shake the hands of Daniel Levy. He'll go back to Italy to stay closer for his family. and he will await new opportunities to come his way. Where do you stand, Ads, with relation to this news from this morning? Has it changed your mind on anything really, or are we as we were, but just another soap episode, as I've said, about the drama around Tottenham?
I mean, I tend to agree with Barnaby. Actually, I think if you go back, to last year, Conte was relatively negative in the press before we had Kulusevski and Bentancur. We were struggling in a lot of games. We weren't playing particularly well. I think we lost one game. It might have been Burnley, and he came out and said, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's me that needs to go. And then there was a whole load of a fanfare, and then we signed loads of players really quickly at the end of the season. And I'm not to say that it's going to be the same this season. I think you know what you're going to get with Conte, and I think Barnaby's point about not sacking him now with Levy is also an interesting one, because I've always thought, there's nowhere to go after Conte with Levy. Forget the football. I understand it's boring, it's dull, and people don't like it, and I don't like it, and it's not enjoyable. But Conte is a winner. He's won everywhere he's been. It's a fact that if you back him properly with good players, he's likely to be success. He's proven that everywhere. So that there's almost nowhere for him to go. So I think there's an element of him saying, well, we need to buy. Arsenal are getting away from us. Other teams are struggling. But he's always made it clear relatively early that he wants to win. And if we're not prepared to do that, then it won't surprise me that he'll walk away. It wouldn't have surprised me in the summer if he walked away, and it won't surprise me in this summer if he walks away, because he's not going to accept being fifth or even fourth, because he doesn't want to do that.
You know what? I mean, yeah, I hear you, Sam. Yeah, I hear you.
And I know people are now turning on him because of the football. And again, I get that. And the view that I take on that, if you don't mind, is a couple of things. One, he has his faults and he's stubborn, and I get that. But when we win 3-4-3, we beat Arsenal 3-4-3, we beat Man City away 3-4-3. No one complains about it. There's clearly a way in which that formation can win, because he's won leagues winning it. And it's not, oh my God, we're getting overrun by 2. They will work tactically on how you set up, where you drop players back, because we've won big games and dominated playing that way. So it's not necessarily the formation. But what I do think the biggest problem this season has been, as again, before Kulusevski and Bentancur came last season, we had big problems. We were very average. We were not playing particularly well. Conte was saying, we're going to struggle, we're going to struggle, we're going to struggle. And then it changed. And it changed because you had Son, who was player of the year, top goal scorer, Kulusevski on fire. Son this season, I worked it out, he's only actually scored one Premier League game he started. He's been abysmal. Kulusevski's been injured. So when you take that out, it just uncovers all the problems that we've got that were there last season, that were masked because we had the best front three, in the league, arguably, you could say, for the second half of the season.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, no one's suggesting we've got a perfect situation right now, and it's quite frankly, as we can see, as I said at the start of the show, I can't address it any other than it is an English term, just a basket case of what is happening right now. Jace, just to bring you in, just so I do make it clear that, from what we understand from all reports now, negotiations have now halted with regards to Conte. He hasn't yet asked to leave, and he's fully focused on Tottenham and turning things around. Jace, your reaction to this morning and the news coming out from Damasio of Conte at one point certainly not continuing in terms of that contract. Thoughts on where we stand right now?
Well, I think that the whole noise around whether he'll be a manager or what next season, as the Lazer just alluded to, it's gone on almost since day one, hasn't it? It almost became the very day after he was appointed that he'd only signed an 18-month contract, and that tells you everything. And it's been constant there. Every single press conference he's asked about it. You can talk about backing him, not backing him, styles of football and that, but there's always noise around Conte. One of the things, when I look back at the program we did when he was appointed, we were actually quite vocal in welcoming that type of noise that goes on around him. We were saying that if he doesn't get his way, he won't be afraid to call the ball out. He won't be able to name and shame certain people. And we were saying that's exactly what we need. If you're going to take Conte on, you're going to have to accept that that's how Conte is, and you're going to have to react to that. And yet now he's doing those types of things. some of us are thinking, go on, keep going, keep pushing. And there's other people saying, I wish he'd shut up moaning about it and just get on with his job. So if you took that personality and was happy to see that personality come to your football club, why are some people changing around that now? I think there is noise. It doesn't look a great fit. I don't think it's ever looked a great fit between Conte and Tottenham, the same way as it didn't with Mourinho and Tottenham. And I think whilst it's one thing to have serial winning managers, they bring with them an expectation of everybody at the football club. And I just don't think we're a serial winning football club mentality right from the very top. And these serial winners are serial winners at clubs that are used to winning serious trophies. So, Mourinho can go to Real Madrid and he can turn that and win a league there because Real Madrid are a serious winning football club. And he can do that at Inter and he can do that at Juve's and Bayern Munich's and things. But when you're as a club that's won as little as we have in recent years, you can bring a serial winner in. We saw it with Ancelotti at Everton. It doesn't work. They don't suddenly become a club that can win because the entire infrastructure of the club is not set up in that way. And I think that alludes to frustrations for Conte, and that will continue to go on.
Is that not? Yeah,
Come
but can I just say, you're right, Jason, when you compare it to Real Madrid. But I was talking to a couple of people on Twitter today, and they were talking about Eddie Howe and so what, and Arsenal. And someone showed the North London Derby starting 11 from 2 seasons ago against us. The only player in the starting 11 for Arsenal was Xhaka. Every other player's gone. That's 10 players. You can go back to us and you can say, we've still got players from 8 years ago playing. That's one thing. And the second thing, people were talking about Eddie Howe, and I looked at Eddie Howe's transfers. He's made, I think it's 8 players, 6 of them start, and it's the same with Arsenal. So it's not about you've got to go to Real Madrid and spend money. The problem at Spurs is we don't buy, and again, we backed Conte in the summer and spent a lot of money, but who did we buy who was right? We need to address starting positions, and we never do that. We never, ever do that. And that is the ongoing historic failure of our club. Whereas, and again, if you look at Arsenal, which I really don't like talking about them, obviously, you look at what they did in the summer and you look at what they've done. They're top of the league now, went for the guy who went to Chelsea, didn't get him, bang, Trossard, see you later, job done. Then don't mess about. Whereas we are dicking about, talking about, can we do a loan with an obligation to buy and we'll pay you 50p over 35 years? And then we'll do something on deadline day when it's too late.
But that's what I mean, Adam. We're not set up as a club to have a serial winning manager.
Why go
and
after
the whole infrastructure behind that? We did the same mentality just isn't there.
We did the same thing to Pochettino. We did the same thing with him. We got to a certain point. We did it with Redknapp as well when we got Ryan Nelson and Saha. So the problem isn't the manager. And if you're going to get that manager, you bring him in and you back him. Back him. Or don't bother at all.
Exactly.
Well, this is what I mean. It just feels like these last 4 or 5 years, coming over to you, Barnaby, it feels like a complete actual waste of time. And I know within that period, we've had some great one-off games. Spurs have got to the Champions League. But what staggers me is that if we rewind to the very start of the Conte to Spurs link, Conte actually turned Spurs down. And subsequently, Spurs then went to Nuno. And then when it all became apparent Nuno wasn't fit for the job, we grovelled back to Antonio, who we then subsequently appointed. And what I think is frustrating fans the most, and again, we are going to come on to ENIC shortly, because I know, again, everyone wants their say on ENIC, and we will come on to that, is that we must have known Antonio Conte's intentions, not from when we appointed him, but from the very first time that we engaged with him. So what I find staggering, absolutely staggering still to this day, is that we not only went there once, we went there twice. We then have allowed the pre-World Cup period to go by and come into January where there is no decision with regards to the long-term future of the manager. And we're in the middle of a window where we've allowed 22 days to go by, when we've arguably had 2 of the biggest games to have needed to do the business, Arsenal and City, and not address the deficiencies in this squad, from right wing back to bringing in another forward. And I think it's completely and totally embarrassing when you hear the agent of a player that subsequently Spurs were keen on in terms of Leandro Trossard. And maybe again, as you know, very well reputable on Twitter, Paul O'Keefe makes that point. We didn't make a bid, but there was clear interest in the player. The fact that his agent came out and said Spurs are dilly-dallying, Arsenal 24 hours, bang. And I think you're now seeing the difference between Arsenal and Tottenham as a club, where Arsenal sit at the very top of that league and want to make a difference and want to improve and have written off the likes of Ozil's contracts and Aubameyang's contracts and have spent big and backed their manager when they needed to. And with Tottenham, if I look at the summer, where quite frankly you can see with Jed Spence, how much as Spurs fans we wanted Jed, he clearly wasn't top of Conte's list because he's not had a game, arguably, to be able to prove himself in the Premier League. And his lack of games tells you everything. Basuma as well, that's again another situation which we had another show for we could dive into. But what I think, Barney, I'm keen to ask you is, how have we got to where we are today with Conte and allowed it to go this far?
Yeah, I mean, said quite a lot there, so I've written some notes so that I can remember. But basically, you mentioned Arsenal towards the end. I think it's important for us to remember that only back in May, Arsenal fans were livid with their club. They wanted Arteta out. And only a few months before that, certainly in the season before that, they still hated their board as well. So things change very quickly. Now, that's not me defending our board or saying that anybody who wants the board out is wrong. But I'm just saying things change very quickly in football. And back in May, the people wanting ENIC out were quite quiet, and that's how it goes, right? Especially on Twitter, that's how it goes. In terms of Conte and what you were saying, I'd like to kind of re-angle it a little bit, actually, and say, do you think, I'm intrigued, Adam, because you brought it up first. I think if Conte was lied to when he joined Spurs, so if Daniel Levy said to Conte, you will have hundreds of millions of pounds to spend because we know that you're the elite manager that needs that money to buy the elite players to get to where you want to go. I think if Levy said that to Conte, and he has since proven to be lying about that, then Conte would have walked by now. I think Conte signed the contract to be manager of Spurs with his eyes wide open as to what was there to spend. In answer to what you said, Ricky, in terms of him turning down Spurs first, my personal opinion is that he purely did that because he thought Kane might be leaving. At that stage, Kane was going to Man City. Everybody thought so. So why would I join Spurs if the best player is not going to be there? Then Nuno happened, Kane stayed, and things changed, right? So that's my kind of opinion on that. But I think Conte was aware of what there was to spend. And then I think what happened at the end of last season was he got top four. And so the club said, for the first time, we are going to do the dividend payout or whatever it was that enabled them to get 150 million pounds. Now, the big argument I would say, or the argument of which I'm kind of on the side of in a big way, is the quality of the recruitment. So I think the reality is when we were linked with Zinchenko and Jesus, right? A lot of the Spurs fans were like, we don't want them. They're like City rejects. That's not good enough for us. Now, you look at Zinchenko now coming in and playing centre midfield from his left-back starting spot for Arsenal, and I think we'd all agree that we made a mistake there. We should have gone out for him. Jesus had a good start at Arsenal, but he wouldn't play for Spurs because of Kane, and that's going into what you said earlier a bit as well, which is that whole feeling of it's hard to replace players who are really good players for Spurs, right? But I would say the standard of the recruitment has not been good enough. I think they've tried to buy players. I think Basuma was a player they tried to buy to get straight into the first team, but Conte has since been shown in the training ground that's not enough. Adam, I can see you're trying to bite on this, so go for it.
No, I mean, so you're absolutely right, but that's the fundamental problem with Spurs. I don't believe that they've gone, you're going to have 200 million. I reckon they've told him a couple of things. There's money to spend. There's going to be an injection of cash. If we get top four, there'll be more money to spend. And also when we get rid of players, there'll be money to spend. Now, the problem is what you just said. Our recruitment is not good enough. And it comes back to that same point. The debate is not whether Jesus was good enough for Spurs. The debate, and Zinchenko, the debate is they were the first players Arteta wanted, therefore they bought them. We do not do that. The players we buy are not the number one targets. Longley he was third down the line. Go back to Mourinho, he got rode on. That's the problem. Spence, great young player for the future. I'm sure that right wing back position was top of his agenda, and he got a young kid who will be good in a few years' time. And granted, he should have played him and stuff like that. But that's the point. It might not be you've got 100 million. And then the other point is we ask for too much money to get rid of players. So we are left with loads of players now. Sanchez, Mora, all of these guys that had we get rid of them, there would have been more money to spend on other players. And that is part of the recruitment and the continuous failure. We did it under Pochettino, did it under Redknapp, can go back, did it under Mourinho as well. Yeah. Whether you like Mourinho or not, where the recruitment, we haven't bought the top targets that we want, and we end up with substandard ones. And then the best example of this, sorry to go on, is the right back position. I always talk about this, right? We sold Kyle Walker for 50 million, right? Since then, we've bought Trippier, Aurier, Emerson, Doherty, and Spence. It's not just the transfer fee and the wages, it's also the agents' fees that you've spent on that, when you could have spent half of that money on one player who was quality. But we've bought 5 and we've probably spent 100 million instead of just paying 50 million on one. We go 20, 20, 20, 20, hoping that one's going to become a Kyle Walker.
Can I, sorry to butt in here. I think I completely agree. And one thing I especially agree on is about struggling to sell players. Like we're really struggling to sell players now. And I also think that is a result of us starting to pay more money on wages than we did 5 years ago. Because actually, one of the things I really remember is how good we used to think Levy was at selling those squad players. We got more money for Paulinho than we thought we would. We got Stoke to buy like 3 players at once at one stage. Portsmouth did that with like No Pamero and all those guys, Pedro Mendes.
Yeah, so it used to be something. That brought down Portsmouth as a club financially. That was Harry and his mates, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, that's true. But anyway, that's something we used to laud Levy for. And now I think we pay them so much wages because we've tried to grow as a club that we struggle to do that. And he thinks that we need to get bigger transfer fees because of the transfer fees we've paid. So I do agree with that.
I was talking. Sorry, Jason. I'll let you speak. Just one little point. So, I was talking about this to somebody else, and I was thinking about my work, right? So, my work when I joined was a fifth of the size that it is now as a national firm, and it got to the point where we had to get a new CEO in to take it on to the next level because the current CEO wasn't good enough and didn't have the experience of a mega club. And I think we're at that point now. Levy's got us to that point, but we're a juggernaut now, whereas we weren't. And we're still trying to be running the same way that we were, when actually you need different people around you to run a much greater business as a whole. Sorry, Jason.
I was going to say, there's also a little bit of inconsistency amongst supporters' views of particularly over a deal, say like Trossard. We've got people saying that's the difference with Arsenal. They're a big club. They've gone bang in and brought Trossard. No, they didn't. They went for Mudryk and they've accepted the cheaper option of Trossard, which is exactly what Tottenham are so often criticised of not delivering the number 1 target and settling on the number 2 cheaper one. Now, from our point of view, I'm not debating whether Trossard's a good enough player or not. It would appear from the summer and talks now, if you believe certain journalists, that our number 1 target, and again, whether he's good enough or not is irrelevant to me, is Zaniolo. So if you're going for Zaniolo and you think you can do a deal, why do you then go and sign Trossard on a cheaper price? And we would be saying as fans, Conte wanted Zaniolo, he settled for Trossard. But when it's Arteta wanted Mudryk and he settled for Trossard, we're saying that's how big clubs behave. So there's a total inconsistency in that and how supporters look at it.
No, I think it's the speed at which they moved rather than the fact they had that number 1 target there. They got gazumped by Chelsea and they went bang, right, here's our number 2. Whereas we would be haggling for 3 weeks later.
Just playing devil's advocate, it's exactly what happened with us and Luis Diaz last year. And let's not forget how fucking livid people were, livid people were when we turned up with Deki Kulusevski and Rodrigo Bentancur because they didn't know who they were and they thought they were budget, second-rate, people we've taken on as a result. Now, that worked out really well for us. And so that needs to be said as well.
They were gazumped on Mudryk, which you're right about, but Tottenham haven't yet been gazumped on Zaniolo. Now,
but
my annoyance would be if Zaniolo's been the target all along, go and get Zaniolo straight away and not waste a month chasing that. And the same with Porro. That's where I'm annoyed. I'm not annoyed we lost out on Trossard as a second choice whatsoever.
So I think you're right. You're absolutely right about that. You don't always get your top targets. That is right. But the thing is, it's not. This happens every transfer window.
Yeah.
Every single transfer. And the best way to say it is, if you think back over the last 10 years, how many transfer windows? That's 20 transfer windows. Have you said that was a great window?
Never.
There's been one or two where you're like,
Adam, can I be honest with you? Every window, no disrespect under this ownership, we have always been one or two short. That's just me being honest. I can't remember under this ownership ever going into a start of a season or even in January we needed a couple more thinking, you know what? We've done what we needed to do. We are ready to go. That's just my opinion.
Even with the Bale money, come on, we all thought, even with Vlad Karikas, we bought 7 players, and we all thought that I'd say we all thought he'd done a good job.
So the 3 windows that I can think of are that one, Barnaby, yes. Even the Mourinho one in the summer where we bought 7 players, I thought, right, okay, we thought that was okay. And the one in this summer, I thought we've actually done okay. But when you only in hindsight analyze it, you say, well, who's actually started and who's actually was good enough? And that's the thing. We address certain positions like with Doherty and so on. But again, it's like, but if you think how many times on deadline day we were close to Moutinho and this one, and all of these top players where we just don't ever do it. When we got Ryan Nelson and Zaha. Yeah. So if it was a one-off, Barnaby, I totally accept what you're saying, but it's consistently over and over again, year in, year out. Each window's the same. Whoever the manager is. So, and that's my issue. Is like, I don't think. I know we're going to talk about it. When you sign Conte, Levy's got nowhere to go now. If Conte walks because we haven't backed him, forget the fact that the football's turgid. He's a current top world-class manager. If it fails, there's nowhere to hide anymore.
Can I just jump in and say, I think it's important for me to say I'm not trying to stick up for the way that Daniel Levy does it or ENIC do it, but I am keen to play devil's advocate sometimes. And one of the things that I'd say, and I'm very much assuming and theorizing, but when you look at, if you put yourself into Daniel Levy's shoes, there must be a part of him that says, every time we've spent more than £40 million, it hasn't worked. Every single time we've gone for a big signing. And let's take, I'd say Romero, who I love, is on the fence at the moment. He's having an iffy season, but I think he'll turn out to be a great player. And Richarlison, I love. Let's see what happens, right? But every time he's made a big money signing, so say 40 million plus or the equivalent of 40 million plus from before. So starting with Soldado, Davinson Sanchez, Tanguy and Ndombele, Gio Lo Celso. So he must go to his recruitment people and say, well, you want us to pay this money, right? But also every time we do it, it doesn't work. But every time I spend 5 million on Bale or I spend 25 million on Bentancur or whatever on Kulusevski, it works a bit more. There's less pressure on them. It works. So there must be a part of him saying that. Now,
then sort your recruitment out.
I agree, and that's what I was saying earlier. It's the recruitment that's bad. Now, Liverpool were absolutely scolded for selling Philippe Coutinho, but they made 2 £75 million purchases as a result, and they were brilliant. They were top. They were elite players, top of the class, what was available, and they did it. So the recruitment has to be better. Now, what I would say is Daniel Levy, he employs the people who employ the recruiter, the people giving him the recruitment stats. So that is his fault. It is his fault. But also, just like I said, playing devil's advocate, that must be in his thinking all the time when it comes to these moments where he gets it down to the last week of the transfer window. And I guess I'm just trying to give a reason as to why this keeps going in a circle.
And you could be right. But let's look at Liverpool, right? Liverpool, again, someone put up the Klopp team that we beat 4-1 that time. And you look at how many players are still there. Klopp wanted Alisson and he wanted Van Dijk. And what did he do? He waited. He said, these are the 2 I want. These 2 players, bang, bang, rest is history, right? And Van Dijk was 75 mil and 180 grand a week. So it's not just transfer fees, it's wages. So,
but can I just add to that as well? Liverpool seems to, and can I add to that, and you want to come back in after I say this? Liverpool always seem to know their succession plan a year ahead. That's what also upsets me, even with Diaz. even when Tottenham were talking about Diaz or talking to him, Liverpool just did it straight away.
And Liverpool have the advantage that Klopp's been there for a period of time, so that they'll have a plan in place. And that's, again, part of our problem, because we're chopping and changing all the time. You don't have that succession. Every manager wants different types of players all the time. So it's a constant conveyor belt. So you're right, the recruitment is a problem for sure. That comes down to Levy as well, because it's been that way for years. The scouting's not right, how they identify. Are they actually saying, who do you want, Mr. Manager? But you can't, it has to cut. You're employing these people.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to bring it back to Conte, because I just need to ask you all the $1 million question. And then we've got to talk about our managing director that is currently in Italy banned at the moment. I can't believe what I'm saying. We're breaking new heights on Last Word on Spurs. There are over 1,000 of you watching us live. So again, thank you so much for all of your amazing support this evening. Really, really do appreciate it. And listen, again, it was an unplanned show, this one. I don't think any of us actually realised what we're going to talk about tonight, but it was always going to have the element of a drama to it because it's Tottenham Hotspur. Let's bring it back to Conte and just see where we're at in terms of everyone's thoughts. So, look, the question I want to ask you always on a percentage now, if you feel he'll be here come the start of next season. For me, I can't see any way in which Antonio Conte is going to be Spurs' head coach come day one of next season. Barnaby, do you share that? What do you think?
No, I don't share the like 0% chance of it. I'd say 25% chance. Like I said, I just feel like it's a bit of posturing, and therefore, if he gets what he wants, I'll try and keep this short, but I basically think there aren't a lot of great options out there for him at the moment in terms of what he could do. And I think he's been saying the whole time, it's about work. We need to build this. We're a long way away with 4, 5, 6 windows. And every time he says that, I think fans are just a bit like, oh, it can't be that far away, can it? But everything we're saying about Klopp is right. So if we're using Conte as our version of Klopp, and I think Levy, he's been quoted before almost as saying, Conte's my favourite coach. I really like him. I think it's posturing, and I think there's a chance that if Levy sticks with him, then he might still be around. But I'm going to go 33%.
Okay, there you go. What I figure that is. As
it's going up all the time. It's going up all the time.
Yeah. Give it a second when something else breaks this evening. Adam, what do you reckon for you? Conte, will he be here come the end of the season?
Barnaby is selling it to me, to be fair. I was his gone. But I agree with him, because I was, again, I go back to a year ago. A year ago, I was like, he'll never be here in the summer. He'll be gone. And then we got 2 good signings. We got top 4 and everything changed. I look like Robert Pires. No, I don't, Nathan.
You look more like Hugo, I think.
I can catch the ball now.
Can you play tomorrow and swap over? Maybe do an impression for us.
I don't let that many into my near post either. So I mean, again, if we bought 2 players in January, like let's assume we get the bloke from Roma and the right back, and we get top 4 and we go on a really good run, I could see
a lot of ifs in there, but yeah.
I could see something happening. I'm gonna go less Barnaby. 20%. I'm saying he's going to be gone at the end of the season.
Jace,
I'm not putting a percentage on it.
Let's come to you. Look, I mean, I've got to say, I watch him in his press conferences, and it looks like he's been at the club for 20 years. He looks so drained. He looks like he's had the full Tottenham Hotspur experience in less than a couple of years. I mean, the bloke he looks like, just give me a break. I just think he looks so tired from Tottenham. As fans, as we're tired. What do you reckon, Jace? Now, do you see him here come the start of August next season on a percentage?
I'd be very, very surprised. Really would be. I think there's so many ifs that depend on it. I think he may well get some players this window. Then we get towards summer, it will be the same type of discussion then. I want 3 or 4 players in. Will we get them? Won't we get them? How soon will we get them? Will we be a top 4 club? If we're not, is Daniel Levy more likely to say, well, we're not in the top 4 and we've played boring football and it's not in the Tottenham DNA, and yet again we go to those types of things. So I think if I was on a percentage things, I wouldn't say it's higher than what I said 0% earlier. Maybe Barnaby's persuaded me to go to 4.87326 reoccurring percent or something. But if I was a betting man, I know where my money would be going, put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we do, as I discuss Conte's future, reports are emanating on this Sunday evening that should Antonio Conte depart, then Mauricio Pochettino wouldn't be adverse to coming back as Tottenham Hotspur's head coach. Look, probably at the moment, given where we are with Conte, probably a discussion for another day. But what we are going to do, we are going to go for our first break of the show. For our listeners that are on audio, in this second half of the show, we'll be discussing Fabio Paratici and the situation around his investigation. But before we do, we've had some super chats come in, so I'm just going to quickly read these out. Richard Blackdog said, I think it's time for some dodgy oil money. Despite ENIC hiring some cracking aces, you don't sit down at the high tables with the big boys if you're not prepared to pay the buy-in. So that's from him. We have had a couple more that I'm going to try and find here. This is from Sunil, who says, the board thinks that 150 million will solve the problem of our squad and allow us to buy 7 to 8 players like we did instead of the 2 to 3 world-class players that would elevate the first team. Look, lots of you getting in touch here. And Jake says here, did we not have an existing budget regardless of the injection? Surely the 150 million was supposed to be in addition. Really good points, really good points. I'm sure, like I say, where this conversation always goes, we'll loop back round to that. But we have to talk about the situation around our managing director and quite frankly, where is he? On what is he doing? We had some news break on Friday, which, look, as we stand here right now, we're bringing you the latest news as we record it on the Sunday evening, where he's been thrust into the spotlight, to be quite frankly, Fabio Paratici. Lots been asking what he's doing, where is he, what's he been up to, why has he not been on the phone as much? Well, essentially, there was a decision made by the Italian Football Federation to ban him for 30 months from anything coming in under the remit with FIFA. And UEFA have now also asked to extend that ban worldwide as things stand. Now, this is because Juventus have been accused among 11 clubs of fixing their balance sheets between artificial gains from club transfers. Now, Juve did deny any wrongdoing, as did the other clubs, and they were all initially acquitted by Italy's federal court in April of last year, with 10 other clubs and 59 individuals, including Paratici. And this was regarding more than 50 transfers from between 2019 to 2021, before actually Paratici's arrival at Tottenham. And I should make that clear. This was before Paratici's arrival, and it had been investigated with the allegation that players' valuations had possibly been inflated to help clubs balance the books. Now, subsequently, the case was reopened in December from the Italian Football Federation, the IFF, and having examined the documents, essentially, there's been, again, a situation where that case has now reared its head. And the ultimate verdict is that now Paratici, as things stands, on a 30-month temporary ban. They have been deducted a 15-point deduction, which I think knocks them down from 3rd to 10th in the league. I mean, just quite frankly, what does this mean for the football club? It's just an absolute laughing stock to go along with the club right now. Go on, Jason,
it's just worth adding, Rick, as well, the 4 directors that were found guilty of such. Paratici took the heaviest sentence as well.
Well, I think what it's quite interesting you say that, because it looks like the actual prosecutor has made a real point where they've actually gone with the heaviest possible penalty for this and really trying to make an example of the situation. Now, what does it mean for Paratici? Well, I mean, for me personally, I just feel like he's always untenable to some degree now, because if you've got a ban for this, and again, obviously, of course, is a proper fit and persons test in the Premier League that you have to pass. I don't know how you can do that if you've been given a temporary ban of 30 months. And the silence from Tottenham is deafening right now. And this is obviously recording on the Sunday evening, so we haven't had any further update from Tottenham. We understand Juve are planning to appeal the decision. But Barnaby, let's start with you. I don't know where this show goes at times. I mean, genuinely, I don't know what to say about this football club anymore. Barnaby, Fabio Paratici, the investigation, the ban. Thoughts on it?
Huge shock. Corruption in Italy. What a surprise. Just another circle that keeps rounding itself. I think this, in terms of your question, what do the club do about it? I think they'll wait for the appeal, to be honest. That's the only explanation I can give as to why he's still got his job if he's been found guilty. He clearly doesn't think he's guilty. He did a statement last week saying, it's too soon. I haven't got my stuff in order, etc., etc. I personally think the big issue that I'm worried about is a lot of the signings he's made for Spurs look slightly on I've gone back to my old club, Romero, Bentancur, Kulusevski, and all those deals look pretty good for us. Romero was a Juventus player but was playing at Atalanta. So my big worry would be if he is, slightly not above the line, not doing the books correctly, then why would he be doing it any differently at Spurs? And will that come to bite us down the line? That would be my big worry. And then apart from that, at this point, I assume, like I said, they're just waiting for the appeal, because I think I read somewhere that the appeal can happen relatively quickly, maybe 30 days or something like that. Could be wrong.
As let's come around to you. Look, I mean, we've had you on this show on so many occasions regarding the finances of the football club. I didn't think I'd be asking you, Ads, with regards to your thoughts on the managing director currently undergoing a ban with relation to maybe subject to an appeal. Thoughts on it, Ads, overall, and should the club have made some form of a communication to where we stand on this, given the nature of the fact Spurs have not done any January business so far this window in terms of incomings to the football club?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of tend to agree with Barney. I think in terms of like making a bit of a big deal and sensationalizing it and having headlines around it because it's Spurs and all of that stuff, and everyone will start going back and say, well, should we even employed him? If he can, it's very difficult with legal related stuff. What can Spurs do? Spurs can come out and say, we're not going to make a comment because there's a legal process going through, which is what they will more than likely have been advised to have happened from a law firm. If they sack him, if before an appeal, that doesn't make sense again, because why would you do that? If he's doing a good job at Spurs, which maybe Spurs board think he is, and he's doing what he's meant to be doing, and actually they're confident of an appeal, you're not going to say anything apart from keep silent until it comes out in the wash. And I think we said, before we came on air, I think, does it impact anything? I doubt it. If there are any transfer negotiations that he was involved in, can he carry them on? Yes. If he can't, I'm sure there's other people at the club or agents that are related to the club that can take them over and continue stuff. I think, it's just more embarrassing based on the back of everything that's going on at the minute, rather than I think it being a massive drama. I think if he is banned and it is upheld, I think then you'll probably see his contract terminated. But you'd assume that Spurs now will be looking at the situation and planning for both eventualities. I mean, maybe it's Spurs, so maybe they won't be. Who knows?
You know what's interesting, Ads? I mean, Paul O'Keefe very, very well. I mean, Paul suggested to us, obviously, Paul's quite well known on the Spurs community and with relation to Paratici. Jace, to bring you in, Paul has said that currently at the moment, this does not affect work outside of Italy. However, UEFA and FIFA will be asked to uphold ruling. He will no doubt appeal. So for now, as we record on Sunday evening, I have to say it's about Tottenham. I have to say the words for now, because I just don't know what can happen to our club at any given second or moment. It's now business still as usual. And as we understand, he was still working Saturday morning, still talking to agents on behalf of Tottenham. So where do you stand on it, Jason, before Adam comes back in there?
I just had another question for Jason as well, actually, on that, or for both of you, just to add on, where is that Italian ban? Like, obviously, we bought Kulusevski and Bentancur from Juventus. Does that mean we wouldn't be able to buy a player from Italy, or he just can't work in Italy in a related club?
My understanding is he just cannot be, based on what we've been told, he just simply cannot be involved in any potential negotiation with relation to any Italian transfer. That's how I read it, Jason. I mean, is that how you see things, Jason? What do you make of the overall story?
That's you're right. That's how I would interpret it. I mean, within the group, Rick, I have always been concerned about the Christian Romero deal and said this deal just doesn't make sense to me, that Fabio Paratici buys a player from, I think it was from Genoa, for something like 26 million euros, and immediately loans him out to Atalanta with a buyout clause of 16 million euros, and he hasn't kicked a ball for Juve. So that's a really strange thing to do, an incredibly strange thing to do. And then on the day that what's their name, Atalanta pay the buyout clause, they then sell the player to Tottenham, to Paratici again for, what was it, 42 million quid. So, I mean, Atalanta have had an incredible deal out of it, haven't they? And Paratici's fingers are all over that deal.
Who's the club there? So if he is doing something dodgy as a person there, because he was the deals in Juventus, have we as a club done anything wrong as the buying club, or is it the selling?
No, I mean,
that's the bit I don't quite.
No, clearly not. We haven't done anything wrong in that respect. So I don't expect any punishment for Tottenham. I just mean that the whole deal, and I've said it, haven't I, all along, Rick?
Yeah,
the whole deal around Romero stinks. Now, that's the only deal I've ever looked at with Juventus, because obviously it affected us. And there were certainly some strange goings on with the prices last year, albeit that Paratici couldn't decide the selling price for Juve for Bentancur and Kulusevski when he was then at Tottenham. But that Romero deal looks an incredibly strange deal right the way through its path. So, and like I say, I've never investigated the rest of Juve's transfer dealings, and I'm certainly not sufficiently capable of going into the ins and outs and going through Juve's books to do it. But that one deal I've never been comfortable with.
What's interesting is we know from Football London that essentially Conte's direct link and communication to the board is through Paratici. Now, Paratici is on a ban, which at the moment does obviously fall into the Italian category. I would be interested to know how that does affect things and whether Daniel is the one taking lead on this Zaniolo deal, if that is going to be happening. I mean, I have to also caveat that and say Jose Mourinho's come out on Sunday evening today for us recording here and said that as far as he's concerned, he thinks the player will probably stay at the club. Now, obviously, there's still 10 days, less than 10 days of this window left to run. But, I mean, the whole situation, Barnaby, at a time when the club's form is erratic, the manager at the moment, his future is uncertain. It's just another... it's just another situation that Spurs really didn't need. And you could argue maybe they've been unlucky with the fact that the timing of it at this particular time. But how does this play out, Barnaby, in your mind now in terms of the rest of this window and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that is much bigger story, I think, as Adam said, like sensationalized because of the situation Spurs are currently in. I would say what it shows, what I was thinking when you were talking about it, is just how clearly Juventus do not have the money to spend on lawyers that Manchester City do. Because the stuff that Manchester City are getting away with, and it's right in front of our face, literally written on the side of their pitch. But they have the lawyers to, put so much paperwork in front of UEFA and FIFA and everybody that it doesn't matter. Whereas Juventus clearly couldn't do that. Now, in terms of how it affects Spurs, I don't know. I really don't think it does. And I think if we were playing well and like second in the league, I don't think we'd even be thinking about it that much. Even if your point about Paratici being the link to Conte, I even read a thing last week that said Conte and Paratici aren't getting on at the moment. So it's hard to know what to read, to be honest, what to believe. But I will go back to what I said, I think, earlier on, which is if Levy didn't want Paratici there, I think he's got a good enough excuse to get rid of him. Same with Conte. So I think he wants them both there, and I think he wants to build with them in a similar way to how Klopp was given the time and how Arteta's been given the time. Now, whether Conte will stick that out, I don't know. In terms of this window, Zaniolo, to me, sounds like a Conte signing. He's big, he's gifted, and frankly, I don't think Levy would put money on anyone as injury prone as him unless Conte was saying, I really want that player, especially, he's not 21. Do you know what I mean? So it sounds to me like and from things I've read, that he's a player that Conte wants. So, all systems go on that front, but it remains to be seen. Equally, I'm saying all this stuff, like I think Conte might well be there next season, but I'm also would not be surprised if Pochettino is our manager tomorrow night. So that's just me saying how bizarre this club can be.
At half time.
Well, that's also happened before, as we know. So, but do you know what I mean? But like I said, I think Zaniolo shows that they're trying to get players in that he wants. I'll just say one more thing as well, because it's been on the back of my mind and I've forgotten to say it, which is, let's not forget, it's when Liverpool got Van Dijk and Coutinho, Van Dijk and Alisson, Liverpool are also Liverpool with the historical Liverpool thing. Every time we go for a player, it's not as simple as we just won't pay the money. There's an element of that. But there's also an element of the clubs that have to have not wanted that player are Manchester City, Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, arguably, but especially now Arsenal as well, and coming into it now Newcastle. So what we have to remember that it's not as simple as Football Manager, unfortunately. Now, what I'd also say is with Bastoni as a good example, the only thing I think keeping him was his love for Inter. I think if we put the money on the table, maybe we could have got him. So there's both sides to it.
I mean, like I say, this kind of brings on to the topic of where we are with ENIC at the moment. I know many want us to...
Now, Vincent Janssen, I've been told. These are terrible.
Getting it all over.
Fabregas, Pires, Janssen, and Lloris. That's a terrible...
What a run. It's going to get easier now. We've got to talk about ENIC in general and where we are with them.
I want to see
now,
Adam take a penalty now against Barnaby, because Vincent Janssen could take a penalty at least.
He could. Guys, let's address ENIC. Many obviously want to have this conversation on ENIC. I'm conscious we have got to just squeeze in as well. We are in January, and also just maybe a prediction on Fulham. So in relation to ENIC, look, I mean, we have to mention the fact there was a protest this weekend where several Spurs fans came together and made their feelings known against the current hierarchy at the club and Daniel Levy, namely. I think social media, there's a loud amount of noise for ENIC to depart, for Daniel to sell the club, for ENIC to move on. And I think what people ask always on Last One on Spurs is, are you ENIC in or ENIC out? And I think, given where we are as a football club right now, I've said this before, that something has to change. We can't carry on where we are right now. And unfortunately, you look at the managers that Spurs have appointed, and the common denominator in the reason why they haven't been successful, in my opinion, has been ultimately the lack of backing they've had. You go back to Maurizio, through to Jose, through to Antonio, where Antonio's won 5 out of his last 8 titles wherever he's been. Jose won a trophy at every single club that he went to. He comes to Tottenham, doesn't win anything, gets sacked 6 days before a cup final, goes to Roma, wins a trophy. Pochettino called for the rebuild, obviously at that time, 5-6 years ago, and didn't get it. You could argue now, given what they gave Mourinho and Conte, why did you not just give the money to Pochettino? And if Spurs are going to go back there, it would mean Daniel Levy is swallowing a huge amount of his pride. And I think it would have to be that he has to come out and say, I got this wrong. Now, he's not been adverse in the past to bringing ex-players back, as we've seen. As we all know, with the likes of Robbie, Jermaine, you go back from, there's so many players that we have brought back to this football club. And then also, in addition to that, we have had a warm affection for managers. Martin Yole's been back in that boardroom, despite of how we treated him as well. Many will argue that was a disgrace, sacking him at half-time, where it was bizarre. And I was at that game with Getafe, where everybody in that ground seemed to know Martin lost his job, apart from Martin to some degree, which I felt really uncomfortable with. And again, there'll be lots that will maybe defend certain moments that the board have done in their time. But I do feel, Adam, that you come into a point now where arguably something has to change. Massively something has to change. And we just can't keep doing this. It's not fair on the supporters that pay the highest season ticket prices in the country. And when you think about this, we're not even being served up a brand of football that we can even enjoy. So we're not getting the brand of football. We're not getting the results. And we're going through managers again and again and again, and nothing is changing. So for me, use that term ENIC out. I do also need to know, saying ENIC out, what the actual, what is the actual replacement to ENIC out? If it's Mike Ashley, I'm not too sure. If it's an investment that is going to take the club to the next level, absolutely we need to have a change. So that's my stance on it. I mean, as I start with you, I know you've backed this football club. You've a season ticket holder at the football club. Where are you in relation to the board?
Yeah, so like you make a lot of really good points there. And I actually, when I was on Twitter quite a few years ago, I was relatively supportive of ENIC and Levy and what they were doing, building the club, Pochettino building, building the new stadium. And I was just like, we can't compete at that point. And then we got to the point with Pochettino, where we had the chance to kick on and we didn't. And we've been a shambles ever since. And, the reality is something has to change now. And I said this before, if you hire Antonio Conte, forget his style of football and all that stuff, right? If you hire him, who is a current world-class top manager that's won everywhere, and you can't make it work with him by not, for whatever reason it might be, so, there's nowhere to hide anymore. With Mourinho, you can say it was a busted flush and finish it. Pochettino, you could say, well, he actually wasn't that good enough. There's nowhere to go now for me. There's nowhere to go. And people on the comments who back Spurs go, well, we have spent the money. We have spent the money. And it comes back to my other point. We have spent money, but we've generally spent it badly. If you go back over the last 5 or 6 seasons and list our transfers, you'll have about 5 that are good. The rest will be a complete waste of time. So we don't back the manager properly. We don't buy the right players. We chop and change managers all the time. At key points in time, we've had the opportunity to kick on and we haven't. And something needs to change now because, and the point comes back to the season tickets. If Levy wants to come out, and I think you mentioned it in the report today, Conte wants winners, Spurs want to trade. If Spurs come out and go, do you know what? We're never going to compete. We don't have that money. We're never going to put that money back in. We're going to try and get in and around the Champions League, and that's where we're going to be. And we're going to charge you to come accordingly. Then people would be upset, but you'd accept it. But you can't charge the highest ticket prices in Europe, want to be up there with the big boys, but go shopping in Lidl, trying to find a gem. And that has always been the case. And it was always, we're in the new stadium, we've got the money now, COVID's out. There's always an excuse. There's no excuses. We got Conte, we got the manager in. There's no excuses now. Something has to change because it's the same recurring theme every time.
Can I ask you though, where the realities of our £1 billion debt and being the most debted football club in the world comes into that as well? Because I know the fans don't want our club to be run like a business, but in essence, it is a business, of course. So that has to come into it at some point, and it certainly came into it. I don't think we didn't spend any money in those 2 transfer windows because we didn't want to. I think it was because we were paying for the stadium, right? When we were building the stadium. So where does that come into it?
So the debt is like a mortgage, right? If you think about your house, I've got a mortgage on my house. That doesn't mean I can't spend money because Spurs have got the highest match day revenue in the country. And when you do transfer deals, if you do a 5-year deal, if you look at what Chelsea have done, you can spread it out over that period of time. That's why they're doing these massively long contracts. So you can spread that out over a huge amount of time. So you do a £50 million transfer over 5 years, you can pay 10 million a year. It's not huge sums of money. The initial number might be, but that player might not be there then. So it's not. I'm not saying that we have to go, and I perfectly accept we can't go and buy and do what Chelsea are doing, and even Newcastle and United, and spend 100 million on a player. I get that. But when we are in the space where we're talking about that 40, 50, 60 million, you can buy really, really good ready-made footballers. And again, someone mentioned it on the chat, Bruno Fernandes, another one. He wanted to come, desperate to come.
There's so many though, isn't there? There's so many.
And then you don't get him, and you get the second down the line or the third down the line, and it doesn't work out.
Jason, let's bring you into this. Look, I want to get your thoughts. What baffles me is on Last Word on Spurs. We've had this discussion about the board for years, and many don't seem to recognise that we do have that discussion. I don't know why. We've always tried to be logical and fair balance in our approach. We don't scream and shout. I don't use that word cancerous towards the board because that is a deadly disease, and I've lost family to that word cancer, and that's why I feel uncomfortable using that word. Some are comfortable to use that. I'm not comfortable to use that word. Same way I'm not going to personally abuse people that do have families. Am I happy with the board? Absolutely not. Do I want more? Absolutely. As I've said numerous times, does there need to be some form of a change? I've said yes. I can't be any more logical in that approach. And just to bring in on that, Jace, you give me your thoughts on where we are with this board right now. Can this continue the way it is? Because it just feels unsustainable right now, the amount of anger there is out there, despite maybe you'd argue not many people down there at the protest.
Well, the anger's also even in the podcast community, isn't it? That we're being almost bullied into saying things we don't want to say or behaving in a way that we don't want to be. You and me, when we started this channel, we said we will never want to be an AFTV style rant channel, and yet others are trying to press ganging us into being there, and that's something it. And if people want to come on the channel and they talk about having a respectful conversation, some of the comments that come in that you're taking money from the club and things like that, it's just that's not a respectful conversation, because we all know it's absolute rubbish. So and personal DMs threatening with death threats and that hardly gets you an invitation to come on our channel, does it? Let's be honest. You know, I want Daniel Levy to stop being the chairman of Tottenham Hotspur. I have done for a long time. Just because I don't tweet Levy out, ENIC out, doesn't mean to say I don't want him out the club. But we will still get the thing that, oh, you're all Levy apologists. That's so far from the truth. It's ridiculous. We had a project manager we're talking about having a project manager now. We had a project manager that completed the project, and then it was right. That project's done. Where do we go? So we sacked the project manager. We then have a win now manager. He gets to a cup final, and we sack him in the week of a cup final. So you know, there's the two extremes, and Daniel Levy has failed on both points. And there's so many things that for me Daniel Levy has failed to do. And I think from the moment Daniel Levy took over in, 2001, whatever his vision was for this football club in the year 2023, I don't think we're in the position that he wanted us to be in 2023. And if you've had 23 years to shape the vision of your football club and you still haven't delivered it, then it's time to go. So I'm fully Daniel Levy. What I don't want to do is stand outside a ground and sing things like "We want you to die," which we've done in the past. Now, I have absolutely no problems with the protests yesterday. People have absolutely every single right to protest. People have a right to strike, as they're doing at the moment. But just because I don't join the protest doesn't mean to say that I don't want Daniel Levy out of the football club. There are other ways. And in terms of the whole ENIC thing, there's also the differentiation maybe between ENIC and Daniel Levy, in that Arsenal supporters, and Barney alluded to this earlier, they wanted Kroenke out the club. We want Kroenke gone. And yet now we're praising Kroenke's management team for being the type of board that Tottenham should be following and for backing a manager. But so if Daniel Levy was to leave the role as chairman and somebody else took over, would that new chairman bring enough vision that they could go to ENIC and say, do you know what? I think we should spend a little bit more here or there. And maybe ENIC would do. I'm not saying they would do, but maybe that. And that's where I'm not sure on the ENIC side. And I've lived through, obviously when I first followed the club, you had Sidney Wow, and then Irving Scholar took over. And we thought that would be great. And Irving Scholar almost bankrupted the club and would have sold it to Robert Maxwell. Then Alan Sugar came along to rescue the club. And I never felt as far away from the club as Alan Sugar's reign. And I can remember when ENIC took over, we were sitting there singing, "We've got our Tottenham back." So just because you have the change, it doesn't necessarily mean that paradise will follow. And that's why I've always said, I'm happy for ENIC to go when I know what type of group is going to take over the club. Because you're right, you know, people who talk about Liverpool's ownership, they forget that Hicks and Gillette took over Liverpool and almost bankrupt the club. You know, Randy Lerner took over Aston Villa. They got relegated. Mashiri won a transfer window. Look at the state that Everton are in. You know, the Saudis have taken over Newcastle because Mike Ashley took over Newcastle and made a mess of it. So just to say ENIC out when there's no plan in place, for me, doesn't wash. That doesn't mean to say I don't want ENIC to leave the club, but I want something to do. And I think the easiest way to compare it, and for me, is if I look at politics, I absolutely want the Tories out of government and want them white from the face. But if that, for me, puts a Labour government in, I don't particularly want that either. So there becomes the balancing act. And that is where I stand on ENIC. But I do think that the vision, the direction, the leadership the club needs, the culture of the club, if you like, comes right down from the man at the top, which in this case is Daniel Levy. And I don't like that vision, that leadership, that culture of the club. As I said earlier, we've hired win now managers, but we are not a club with a win now culture. And therefore, until we get that, we will never be that win now club. And I think it's Daniel's time to say, hand it over. Whether there's somebody at the club capable of taking it on, I don't know. I would like somebody to go in there totally from the outside with a fresh view on things. And like I say, maybe they would get ENIC to make different decisions than Daniel is. I don't know that, but I'm definitely leave it out. But I'm not going to be bullied into hashtags and talking about cancers at the club and singing "We want you to die" like we've seen on messages. And like I say, if people want a respectful conversation, show us some respect. Don't use your own channels to make programs about ours and tell us what we should be saying and how we as a channel should behave, because it's not there. It will never be there.
Can I just jump in and just say I completely agree. Like, I'd literally written down the names: Mashiri, Lerner, the Glazers, Bill Hicks, the fact that Ellis Short, the fact that Liverpool fans actually, there's a big group of Liverpool fans who want John Henry out, and they've won the Champions League and the league, right? So there's also an element of people, people aren't happy in life. People especially aren't happy on social media. There's an element of that. I get that. I properly get that. But I completely agree. Who is it coming in? What is going to replace it? And the reality of ENIC is they run it like a business. It all has to be sustainable, okay? And when it was going well for us and we were nearly winning the league, we loved that. We loved that we were doing it properly. And it's important not to forget that, okay? So what we're talking about is, if we want to replicate what the teams above us have, we're talking about state money, oil money, or, the best I can think of, actually, I think is, John Henry has done a good job. We talked about that Coutinho sale. He reinvested the money. They've done it right. I think Arsenal and Liverpool are in a similar boat. But apart from them, they're all not run like businesses. So it's very difficult to know who this thing is. The interesting one I was just thinking of is Todd Boehly was interested in buying Spurs, apparently, according to The Athletic, 2-3 seasons ago. Now, Todd Boehly is spending ridiculous sums of money at Chelsea. I don't know how it works with financial fair play. Maybe Adam can help me on that. I really do not understand it. If Todd Boehly had come to Spurs, would he have done the same? And if so, maybe that is the kind of thing that Spurs fans want, that we want, right? We want an American billionaire who kind of looks like a bit of a playboy, seemingly kind of playing Football Manager. There was this amazing tweet from the guy who is the head of Football Manager, who said yesterday, people keep saying that Todd Boehly is acting like he's playing Football Manager. Let me tell you, Football Manager is way more realistic than that, right? Which I thought was hilarious. But is that what we want? Maybe that is what Spurs fans want. What we want is like some kind of American playboy. But what I'm coming back to is there are so many examples of ones that haven't worked where clubs have gone down that it's difficult. It's be careful what you wish for a little bit. I really do think it is. And when I was at the ground at the North London Derby, I spoke to the guy who was 2 seats down from me, and I said, who's really ENIC out. And I said, so, are you willing to risk relegation with something that goes appallingly for that? And he's like, yeah, I'm willing to risk it now. I'm fed up with this. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not. I'm in my team are 5th place in the league. We're in the Champions League next round. And I think we're only a 3, 4, 5 game good run away from people being slightly less mad. But I understand why some people aren't like that. So,
and you're right, Barnaby. Someone will say, yeah, I'm prepared to be relegated. But come the actual reality of being relegated under a new owner, I wonder if they'll say, oh, I don't care
Everton.
if we go down. As long
all
as
we need to say is Everton.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just, I don't mind. We've seen Abramovich quite happy to lose money. Let's be honest, Chelsea were quite happy to lose money. Manchester City effectively do lose money, but they cover it up. But other clubs, there's nothing dirty in wanting to run a profitable football club, because the more profits you make, the more you should be able to invest in your football club. So I don't want Tottenham to be run at a 50, 60, 70 million pound loss every year, because you want the investment to be ploughed into the football club. So there's nothing wrong in that. And the chances are, and Todd Boehly may well find this out at Chelsea, that they are an investment group that have gone in there and if in 2 or 3 years it's not working at Chelsea, they will not be very happy. They won't be spending money on Mudryk and things like that. They won't be happy. So any investment group will want to return. If Tottenham was sold to an American, to a Chinese, to a German, to a Norwegian, and it's a businessman, the chances are he will want Tottenham to return a profit to justify his expense of buying into the club. But this profit before glory, the profit should lead to the glory because you can invest more in your football club. That's what I want.
I think can I just make a couple of points? I mean, I agree in the main with most, or pretty much all of what both of you are saying. I think the difference is with some of those clubs. I think, people often talk about football or business, your own jobs, and they say in football the manager gets stale. It's time for something fresh. That, all of the club, even take Liverpool as an example, they've had 3 owners in the past, I don't know, 10 years. I don't know what it is. Arsenal had Kroenke, they've had different owners. We've had the same. And I think, we mentioned Paul O'Keefe. I was chatting to him about a little while ago. I think all of the board at Spurs, every single one of them has been there for 20 years. It's the same board, the same people. So I agree, we shouldn't just go and flog ourselves to somebody that's going to take us down the pan, but it needs from the top something different. And that could be Levy taking a different role and other people coming in or something. And obviously money comes with that and a new injection. And I said it before, Levy did a great job. He has done a brilliant job. You can't knock it from taking Spurs from where we were to where we are now with that infrastructure. But if in a normal business, if you had a corner shop and you grew your corner shop into a business that you wanted to float on the stock market, you get a completely different board in of completely different people that are much more experienced at a much higher level. And I think that's where we're at as a club. We are at that now, where because we're making mistakes. And it's not necessarily it needs to be ENIC Out. And I totally agree with everything you say on that, Jason, because I don't believe they want to do a bad job. But we need something new. We need new money, new ideas. Because the players, agents that I work with, they all say, well, we know how Levy works. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what you're getting. And like you say, the culture of the club comes from the top down. And that's where something has to change.
How does that work then? Is that what those Qatari talks could be? Could it be like he's willing to take that step back, bring money in from the outside, and therefore they can't be though because they're PSG owners too, right? So how does that actually work?
Yes, I think there are rules around minority stakes you can take if you don't have like full control ownership of it. So I think you can have minority stakes, and I suspect that would allow a cash injection. It would still mean that ENIC are the majority shareholder and will be controlling, and I suspect Levy would be the chairman, but it might allow money to come in so that we could open the purse strings more, and then you might see a slightly different approach. And it could then mean that, if the Qataris, as an example, got bored of PSG, they could sell and then they buy more of Spurs and eventually take over. It's those types of things that could happen. So, that type of thing would be good. New people, fresh ideas, fresh thinking. That's what we need as a club.
Can I just say, Rick, when this whole thing as a podcast, and excuse the other two boys because it's thrown more at you, myself, at Lee, and the regulars on Last Word on Spurs, and I've said people actually hear what they want to hear. I've just given a big thing there about I want Daniel Levy out of my club, and yet you see a comment there that says in the comments, Levy's PR team are in full effect.
Someone called you woke as well, Jason, as well.
I mean, it's just nuts, isn't it? Have they not heard what I've just said? Adam's actually making criticisms. You've said it's time for a change, and you get a comment like that. Levy's PR team in full effect. I mean, this is the problem when you're pushed to say things by others, and they just don't listen.
I think the problem is,
we get accused the other day, for instance, that we must be in with Daniel Levy because we're sponsored by Beavertown.
Yeah.
Beavertown's a private company away from Tottenham that wants to reach as many Tottenham supporters, so it's chose to advertise through Last Word on Spurs. Nobody at Beavertown has ever told us, now we're sponsoring your show, I want you to say Daniel Levy's a fantastic bloke and never say it. But the people that want the respectful debate throw it out there that's what's going on. They don't want to hear the truth.
I think the problem is that the only way people will think that we want ENIC Out is to be abusive.
As if we're on the protest singing, we want you to die.
It's tricky.
Nuts.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, it's one of those debates that unfortunately I think is going to rumble on and on and on. I'm very conscious of timing that we've got over 1,300 of you watching us live right now, and we're an hour and 20 into the show. I just want to do a quick 5 on January and then close it on Fulham for everybody's own mental mindset right now. It's still, as we stand right now, we've got, for those on a Monday morning commute, it will be 7-8 days to go of a window where Spurs haven't done any business whatsoever. There's been a lot of links in relation to Pedro Porro and Nicolo Zaniolo. I mean, Barney, let's come to you first on this. I know it's a subject that does irritate many, the January window, because you're talking about if, buts, maybes, and what is essentially going to happen, where Spurs, obviously last January, weren't linked with Benton Kulusevski at this point, and on the last day of the window, they signed 2 players that, quite frankly, no one even knew much about. And then they turned out to be the difference in helping Spurs clinch the top 4. So where are you, Barney, with the transfer window? Are you fairly relaxed? And what do you expect to come out of it?
I expect exactly the same thing to happen. I think Paratici is famed for having 10 deals going at once or maybe more. And
we
Levy,
know now. We know
Levy
why
is,
now.
And Levy, yeah, that's exactly what I said earlier. Exactly, yeah. And then and Levy is famed for he's been, lots of people who've worked with him before have said he positively loves coming into work on the last week of the window. Do you know what I mean? He sees it as his time, right? So I imagine that'll happen. I have to say, if he doesn't get us a right wing back, it would be beyond reproach, because, Matt Doherty, clearly a decent bloke, but even when he's on top form, and people look back at like the back end of last season before he got injured by Matty Cash and say, Doherty was on top form. He wasn't great.
I agree with you,
and Emerson Royale is, I think, a good defender, and he had a half decent game in the first half against City the other night, right? And I feel sorry for him. But if he doesn't come out of here with a wing back for the 3rd window in a row, then I think that's beyond reproach. So that has to happen, that Porro deal, I think. I think it has to happen. I think even Levy would know there'd be real uproar if he doesn't get that over the line. And then other than that, maybe something we haven't heard of. I don't know. I think, unfortunately, pains me to say, but I think Hugo, I agree with most people in that I think Hugo's done. I think, he has come out and said, I'm mentally exhausted. Well, does nobody remember what happened after the 2018 World Cup? He bloody crashed it. He drove and crashed into a load of cars. So what were we expecting him to do when he didn't even win this World Cup? So the fact that he's throwing them in left, right, and centre doesn't really surprise me. But it pains me to say I don't think they're going to get a keeper this window. I think it's too difficult. So no keeper, and probably just something a bit out left field, and he's got to get the wing back over the line, because otherwise we're just not good enough. And that's where the system falls down. Every time it goes to the right, any opposition knows, we just press the right. Yeah. Nothing's going to happen. So that has to happen as far as I'm concerned.
So Barnaby, 2 for you, 2 in as things stands. That's what you expect and what you would want to happen.
I think Porro and at least 1 kind of from the left field slightly. I mean, or it could be Porro and Zaniolo, or if Zaniolo doesn't happen, something else, probably Italian.
This isn't to trigger Jason or wind him up coming over to you, Ads. That the worrying thing for me is that we were linked last January. I think it was last January with Adama Traore for the whole month, and I'm not suggesting. Well, I am suggesting it a little bit that it does feel this Porro situation is very similar, where we've been linked with a player consistently throughout the whole month, and we don't actually end up with a player and fail to address an area which we needed to do. What's your thoughts for you, Adam, on where this window has to end in terms of what needs to come out of it to make us feel a bit more positive about what's left of this season, when we are still in the FA Cup, Champions League doubleheader against AC Milan, and still in a league position where if Spurs will get back on track, I can hear a laugh the track in the background, top 4 isn't out of the question. It feels like at the moment, but it isn't, if I'm being honest with you. Add thoughts on the window, how it will end.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to assume 2 are going to, 3 would be perfect, central midfield, right wing, and a centre back, but you could see 2 coming. It can't. I don't think it can be less. I think with the uproar at the minute and the unhappiness, I think 2 things will have to happen. I think I read what Mourinho said. He said that Zaniolo's asked to leave, but no bid suitable's come in yet, which for me is a bit of a almost like saying, "Come get this deal done, lads."
Does he not play for them? Does he not play for them? Is that why he wants to leave?
Not many appearances this season. No, he hasn't played many games in the season. In and out of the team.
I think he was injured early part of the season, wasn't he? Didn't he have a shoulder which took him 2 months out? So
I mean, sounds like a Spurs signing, didn't he? Sounds like a Spurs signing. Connor,
Yeah, we'll sign him injured, rush through the medical. The only thing I would say, and this isn't a defence of Spurs or Levy, but I've said this about the January transfer window. The January transfer window is like dominoes, and it's like a house buying process, and very little gets done until the end of the window because people are stacking stuff up. So it wouldn't surprise me that Porro's done, as in it's been agreed, but they're like, right, we just got to find a replacement, and Spurs are like, well, we just need to get Emerson out the door, as an example. So it could be like, well, we're just waiting to fill these gaps, because if he's going, they need to get somebody in. And that's sometimes what happens in these, especially in January, when it's such a short, condensed period of time. So, I'd be amazed if 2 don't come in, whoever they might be.
If it's not two, Adam, that's not acceptable, right? It has to be minimum 2 for you. Has to be.
Absolutely. I think minimum 2, but I think it will be 2. It won't be more than that. If it's not 2, if it's just 1, it's not good enough, is it?
Okay, Jason, come over to you. Window, what needs to happen in your opinion? What has to happen?
I think, like Adam, I would be surprised if Porro's not done, and I think there will be one other. But if Antonio Conte is not going to be here next summer, and if the club actually know that, then I can see that it would be daft to go and spend money on players that he wants when he's not going to be here. So there's also that in there. But I hope Porro gets done. I feel there's a difference between Porro and Traore in that I feel like the club do want Porro. I always felt like the agent of Traore wanted Tottenham. There's a slight difference in that. I think that came more from Traore's end than it ever did from Tottenham, and maybe from Johnson's baby oil end as well at the same time. But I think it's just a crying shame at the moment, because I look at us and we are 5th in the table with a chance of top 4. We are in the FA Cup. We are in the Champions League knockout rounds. And so you feel like even in the mess that the club is in, there's a lot of clubs would like our mess to be in. And I just feel like if we got even half the decisions right that we could get right, what a fantastic football club we would be. What a fantastic position we could be in. And there's no reason why it wouldn't be us sitting on top of the table. So, it's never as bad as it seems, but just get some more decisions right, because we're not a million miles. And I've watched that game this afternoon, and those 2 clubs look like they are on a totally different level to Tottenham, the intensity they're playing at and everything. And yet at the start of this season, I think Man United lost at home to Brighton, went to Brentford and got beat 4-0. And brought in Lisandro Martinez, and everyone saying, what the hell are they brought in a little centre-half like that for? And it just shows you how quick that has since turned. And this was a club that we brutalised 3-0 in May, and look how that's flipped the other way. So with a few right decisions, you don't have to write this season off. It can turn just like that. But obviously, we need our big players to perform, particularly, and we do need Sonny back in form.
Yeah.
Ten Hag's another one, though. He got backed with exactly who he wanted.
And reportedly at Tottenham, when he went for an interview, they weren't quite impressed with him, which is, again, ironic to some degree. Right, guys, we literally are going to go straight to Fulham. Take you into this final break of the show from audio. We're going to hear from a guy from the Fulham Focus who's given us that preview very, very kindly. Right, constant time. I'm going to go straight to a prediction. Barnaby, let's come to you. Spurs going into this game, losing 6 of their last 10 league games. We are bottom of the league table now for goals conceded since October. 21 goals conceded in the last 10, worst in the Premier League, only to Everton. I'm really sending this to you, aren't I, right now? Barnaby, thoughts on Fulham? Let's get your prediction.
Spurs fan, so nervous about it. Naturally, the fact that we turned Palace over 4-0 away gives me a bit more confidence. What I like about Fulham is the way that they play. I think they'll leave spaces in behind. Be really interesting to me whether he plays Richarlison instead of Son. I hope he does. I think he needs to for Son's good as much as anything else. For me, Sonny is trying to do things that he's not good at because he's not got no confidence. He's trying to come for the ball. He's trying to dribble at players rather than kick it past them and beat them. And it's not working. He needs a rest. So I play Richarlison with Kane and Kulusevski as well. I think we'll get some chances in behind them. We need to cut out the individual errors. It's obvious. If we cut out the individual errors, then I think we'll win.
Perfect. And Barney, just one reminder for everybody about this new project you're working on. I have to give you the opportunity again. Tell us about the new project very quickly for those that might have joined us very late or missed the start of the show.
Yes, guys, for any of you watching, I've got a new page called Football Penalty Gamble. If you reckon you are good at taking penalties, you can take 5 penalties against me. And if you score them all, you'll win 100 quid. It's on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. It's called Football Penalty Gamble. Follow it. DM me on any of those platforms, and I'll come to wherever you are, and we'll do some penalties. You can win some money.
There's no excuses. There's 1,200 of you watching us. I expect every one of you that are watching this right now to be DMing Barnaby straight away. Please get on it.
Football Penalty Gamble, and I'm sure Ricky will put it up on Twitter as well for any of you.
It'll be in the comments of this show, in the actual description of this show as well for audio.
Come and win my money, guys. Come and win my money.
There'd have been a time we'd have put Harry Kane up for it, but I'm not so sure we will now.
Funnily enough, in my voiceovers, when someone skies it, I just call it a Harry Kane now.
Barnaby, a real pleasure, mate, having you back on Last One on Spurs. Having the first of many having you back on, mate. You're a top man. Jason, let's come to you. Look, Spurs right now, 2 points and 1 place separates the teams in the Premier League table for Spurs and Fulham. I didn't think I'd ever be saying that. It just shows you how remarkable they've been under Marco Silva. Thoughts on the game, Jason? A prediction, please.
Fair play to Fulham where they are, because they've come up with different Fulham this time, haven't they? And you have to have respect for what Fulham are doing this season. They've been brilliant. If we don't make mistakes, we can definitely go there and win. We didn't really make too many mistakes at Palace. We win 4-0, and we've just seen Newcastle and Man United get held at Selhurst Park. So it shows you what can be done when we get things right. But we need to get everything right at Fulham. That first half at Manchester, we got most things right. We're going at 2-0 up. That just shows you what we are capable of. The individual mistakes at the moment are horrific. I probably, like Barnaby said, I would put Richarlison in. I think it definitely has to happen. And maybe I would put Fraser Forster in goal as well. I think that's another thing I'd perhaps like to see. The back line, take Dyer out, put Sanchez in, take this one out, put Tanganga in. I'm not sure what you can do with that back line. But if we don't make the mistakes, I think we go to Fulham and win. I just don't know how many mistakes we'll make.
Yep. Jace, I won't thank you for your honesty, because you're always honest on Last One on Spurs. And you never, in my time of knowing you the last 7-8 years, you've never held back, and you've always said how you feel, mate. So again, thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for addressing some of the key points that have been raised in the last few weeks. And hopefully that will get some people off our back that say, apparently we're Levy lovers and we sit on the fence. Because I don't know a show that could be more diverse than this one, where everybody, as called as is and said as is, and they've shared their opinions. So Jace, thank you, mate. We look forward to having you back on soon. Ads, let's close it with you. We know, I think, at the moment that we're going to need to assess Benson, and Kulusevski ahead of this one. It depends, obviously, like I say, Spurs in terms of their form, whether Perisic will get another go again at being fought for 3 of the goals against City the other night. And Son's form at the moment, as Barnaby said, really alarming. Thoughts on the game, Ad, and a prediction from you?
I think we'll win. I think providing Bentancur and Kulusevski play, I think we win. I think we're a completely different team. Even though we haven't been great, we're a significantly better team. You saw it against Man City in the first half, especially. To be fair, I actually went out to get my son, and I missed the first 10 minutes of the second half, and I checked my phone. I was like, fucking hell, here we go. I think we'll win. I mean, Fulham are a decent team. When we click with those players, we can win. I think we'll win tomorrow. I think Richarlison will probably start. I've not been overly impressed with him when he has started. I think he's looked much better off the bench, to be honest with you. I definitely do not want to see Sanchez play at all, or Tanganga, because if you have those two and Lloris, then we won't win. Also, as well as people saying Jason has been honest, Rick, that was the most almost animated and semi-angry I've ever seen you on that little rant before as well. So,
well, you know what? Sometimes you have to make a point which you feel. Again, I mean, after the show, there'll still be, as soon as this gets uploaded, there'll be some that say you're still Levy lovers. You still sit on the fence. So, I mean, again, I'm aware of that. You can't please everyone, but I think always on Last One on Spurs, we try and have a different various of opinions. We've done that tonight. We've been honest, open, outspoken as we always are. There is nothing off limits, and just for the record, no one censors me at all, in my opinion. No one would, no one has, no one can.
What it is, it's, so, in the life of social media, it's polarization. It's that or that. You're not allowed to be in the middle. It's like you're black or white, red or blue, this or that. There's no middle ground. You have to be that. which
That's
is
the problem.
life.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem. That is, and unfortunately, that's where we're at. But again, I must say a massive thank you to the viewers tonight, the audience. We've had about 13 to 1,400 of you in total watching this live. So again, last word on Spurs. Look, hopefully you see it as a bit of therapy. Hopefully it gets you through the week. We are, of course, back with you tomorrow night. Please for some good news. Please for some good news. For instant reaction to Spurs' result up at Craven Cottage. But from the brilliant Barnaby Slater, love having Barnaby back on last one on Spurs. Hopefully the first of many in his return. The wonderful Jason McGovern and the superb Adam Osper from Sports Finance. From us here, please guys, have a really lovely rest of your evening. Keep safe, keep well, keep the faith. And as always, come on you Spurs.